All right, now let's get to the documents regarding WikiLeaks. So the first one here that you released on your site says that GCHQ was secretly monitoring visitors to a WikiLeaks site. Tell us a little bit more about that.
You know, it's interesting. One of the fears that I often hear from people, and this is even before is that if they use the internet for purposes that the government dislikes, such as supporting groups that the government considers dissidents or reading material that the government considers subversive, that they're going to end up on some government list somewhere, that they could be subject to being targeted in some way. And you know, if you first listen to those kind of concerns, there may be a tendency to dismiss them as conspiracy or paranoia. And yet what this document reveals is that the GCHQ is doing exactly that. WikiLeaks is an organization that has never been charged with any crime, let alone convicted of one. And yet here's the GCHQ collecting very invasive personal information, including IP addresses of people who have done nothing wrong, who have simply visited the WikiLeaks website, whether that's to submit material to WikiLeaks or to read the material that they've published or to support the organization or simply out of curiosity. You have the GCHQ using their access to the international fiber optic cables that carry internet activity through them, exploiting that access to collect information on individuals for the crime of visiting the WikiLeaks website. I think it's incredibly concerning, troubling, to have a government targeting people by virtue of their legal political activity online.
Now, the third document, Glenn is back with us now, it shows that the NSA was pushing for WikiLeaks to be designated as a malicious foreign actor. What exactly does that mean, Glenn? And what would that have allowed them to do?
Interestingly, the NSA document itself actually acknowledges that that term is pretty ill-defined, which then vests the agency with lots of discretion about who should receive that designation. And what the agency says is that the benefit of slapping that label on someone is that you essentially get to subject that website to the broadest and most permissive type of surveillance, which includes being relieved from the obligation to exclude out of your searches what you're sweeping up, communications that American citizens are having. So if, for example, that designation were applied to Anonymous or to WikiLeaks or to the website Pirate Bay, the copyright sharing website, as this document also contemplated, it would mean that any Americans who have interaction with those websites would have their communications susceptible to being monitored, stored, analyzed, listened to without the need for a warrant. They would just label it incidental collection. And they would say we weren't targeting those Americans. We were targeting this malicious foreign actor, the website WikiLeaks or whatever. And we just happened to sweep up Americans. And this really gets to the heart of a huge misconception that has been propagated by President Obama himself and numerous officials, which is they constantly say, we don't listen to the conversations of Americans without warrants. Now, the premise of this is kind of warped in itself, right? Which is that, well, as long as we're only doing it to foreigners, as long as we're only invading their privacy, nobody should really care. But the statement itself is just false. What the 2008 FISA Amendment Act did, that President Obama, lots of Democrats voted for, is it basically legalized the Bush NSA program that had caused such a scandal, the purpose of which was to target the communications of American citizens when they speak internationally in a way that you don't need warrants in order to eavesdrop on. And that's what this would have done. It would have made it so that they would have said our target of surveillance here is WikiLeaks or Pirate Bay or Anonymous, and all the Americans who communicate with them that we end up eavesdropping on, well, we don't need a warrant because it's just incidental. It's just something that we didn't intend, but lo and behold, we ended up getting it. And that's the game that the NSA always plays. It's how they end up surveilling and monitoring Americans' communications without warrants, despite their constant denials that they do that.